This is entitled The Song of the Unfruitful Vineyard. It's a parable in the form of a poem, a ballad that describes the broken relationship between Israel and its God, Yahweh. The theme is not only found here in Isaiah, but throughout the prophetic literature, and it goes something like this. Here's the theme. Yahweh loves Israel. Yahweh repeatedly attempts to bring Israel prosperity and prominence. Israel consistently acts out and rejects Yahweh's guidance. Yahweh God becomes disappointed and angry. In our scenario for this morning, it was the beloved had a vineyard. There we go. Had a very well-placed vineyard. The garden then tilled the soil and pulled the weeds and planted the very best grapes, intended it to be prosperous, and later built a wine press. The gardener worked exceedingly hard preparing that vineyard, and he waited patiently for it to produce grapes. He went out of his way to make sure the vineyard was well taken care of and would flourish. But it did not. It did not produce good grapes. It produced wild grapes. The gardener was unhappy and angry. Our prophet Isaiah, in his writings this morning, has God bringing a legal case to the people of Israel, to the people of Judah, because he has gotten to the point where his patience has worn out and says, enough is enough. Judge between me and my vineyard. What more could I have possibly done for my vineyard that I had not already done? I expected grapes and I got wild grapes. He is through with the vineyard. He is finished. He will tear down the hedge and he will devour and take down the wall and trample it. He will do nothing more for it. He will not till it or tend to it or loving care for it. He will abandon it, turn his back on it. And just in case you don't understand the depth and breadth of his anger and frustration, he adds this exclamation to his pronouncement. I will command clouds that they rain no rain upon it. That's a harsh statement. And by that, the readers know who God is talking about. The readers know that God is not talking about a vineyard. The readers know that God is talking about them. I expected justice and saw bloodshed, righteousness but heard cries. You can hear the depth and the pain and anger and sadness. Why, O Israel? Why, O Judah? Why have you done this? Stacy Simpson-Duke says this, the accusation is harsh and penetrating. Although Isaiah speaks in the broadest terms, we do not have to look far for examples of bloodshed where justice should be, or cries of pain in place of righteousness. The vineyard is to produce sweet fruit of nourishment for the world. God nurtures, protects, and tends, yet the world still goes hungry for the gift God's people were meant to bear. These people had everything they needed to be people of justice and righteousness. They had everything that they needed to follow God in God's way. God showered them with goodness and blessing. God loved them and watched over them. But instead of producing justice and righteousness, our text tells us they fell into violence and dishonesty. Instead of growing into good and faithful-filled people, they turned into wild and self-serving people. I imagine they disregarded the 10 Commandments and forgot the golden rule. They forgot God's saving hand, taking them out of Egypt into the land of milk and honey. God waited patiently for his people to produce justice and righteousness, but they did not. And least we have any misunderstanding of what made God angry. If you read the very next verse in Isaiah, Verse 8, it says, you are in trouble. You rake over house after house and field after field until there's no room left for anyone else in the land. You are in trouble. You get up early to start drinking and you keep it up late into the night. At your drinking parties, you have music of string instruments and tambourines and flutes, but you never think what the Lord has done. And then Isaiah goes on and says, and so his people know nothing about him. Pretty damning words from Isaiah, calling out the lustful greed of the rich and the powerful for their own pleasures and privileges while exploiting and displacing the common folk, condemning their lack of gratefulness for the generosity shown to them, never acknowledging that it was God's hand and God's leading and God's blessing. You see, they thought only of themselves, their needs, their wants, their desires, forsaking all others, and most of all, forgetting and forsaking Almighty God, repaying good with evil. I get it that we come on Sundays and we want to leave feeling good and uplifted, but there are times that I'm not doing you any favors if we don't deal with passages that cause us to stop, painful, uncomfortable passages that says to the church, examine the fruit that you are producing, the fruit that you are giving for the world. Love and joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Is that what we are giving? I get a little blog from the editor of The Outlook, which is a Presbyterian magazine. And Jill Duffield, the editor, writes this: there is nothing God doesn't do to set us up for faithful action. The question for us then is, what will we choose to do by faith? What will we risk? What words will we speak or refrain from saying? Where will our loyalty to be, and how will that loyalty be manifested in the world? Which side of the divide of wealth, opportunity, prosperity, or safety will we stand? These are not theoretical questions. Not now, not ever. Lives are at stake. We are called to be better. As God's children, we are called to do better. We are called to be bearers of justice and righteousness, beacons of light to the world. It's not optional. Our scripture is clear that the beloved are so to continue seeking a right relationship with others and with God, looking for the image of God in each and every person, black and white, rich and poor, young and old, male and female, immigrant and native born. I did not mean to pick Isaiah until Debbie got on me, because it was a text I had chosen was going to be even a little more difficult to deal with. And I picked Isaiah before Alan Pennant came, and yet I think it apropos that he's here today. For you see, it matters that we support our brothers and sisters in Immokalee. It matters. And it matters that we pay attention to those farm workers in Bethel and here in Sarasota, making sure that people have basic essentials of life, a roof and some food on the table, a fair wage for the work they do. You see, my friends, it's not just something we do, but it actually matters that we pay attention to All Faith Food Bank and we make sure that we bring food and our funds to support it, so that none of our children or youth will go hungry at school or at home. It matters that we stand with our brothers and sisters across the aisles, across denominations, across cultures, through SURE, as we stand up to make our voices heard, that just practices are happening here in Sarasota. It matters, as Alan said, and then even telling, which is really interesting, that we support Family Promise and we make sure it gets going again. Do you know, and I've said this before, there is no place for a single man and his child, if they are female, to be that have safe housing for them in here in Sarasota. You can find it for women and for children, but for a man who's by himself with children, there is no organization that meets that need except for Family Promise. It matters that we volunteer for Meals and Wheels and Salvation Army. It matters that we have women who are willing, bless them, Jackie Fontaine and Jenny Repolakis, and I think, Dorothy, you do it too, all the people who help with Dorcas, who come and sew. Alice, I know Alice Shanklin has done that too. It matters. The prophet Isaiah is speaking pretty damning words, and we need to hear, because it matters. It matters that we show up each and every Sunday for a time of sacred worship. And let me tell you, those who have young children, we appreciate that you are here because we know how busy you are. We know your life is full, and we know here at church that sometimes Sunday is the only time that you have for family time and rest. So we are going to try to address that, but we want you to know how grateful we are that you're here and that we love you and your children. We want to say to the choir, thank you for showing up every Wednesday and every Sunday, even through the summer when the rest of us are taking vacations. It matters that we have loving folks who help with Joy Company, who make sure that our kids hear the word, who bring them love and who keep them safe. It matters that we have someone here that takes care and watches over our youth. It matters that we have here that are concerned about how our campus looks, that it's welcoming, that it's functioning. It matters that we have a prayer chain and a transportation committee. It matters that there are those of you who are butterflies and monarchs. It matters that we have a place that men can come and join and do study. It matters that we have a place that women can come and join and do study. You see, it matters because what Isaiah is saying to us is that we are God's vineyard. We are God's vineyard, and God has placed us here at this time in this place. And we must decide what kind of fruit that we will bear. We must decide, are we for justice and righteousness, generosity and compassion, peace and goodness? Will we live by the faith, believing in the things that we stand up each and every Sunday and affirm to hold true? Will we trust in God's saving power? Will we respond to God's unconditional love for us and abundant grace as we open our hearts and our wallets? Isaiah has some pretty damning words that we, the church, in all times and all places, must stop and check and examine and see. For there are times that we need to prune, and there are times that we need to water more, and there are times, yes, there are seasons when the land needs rest. What I love about Isaiah and Jeremiah and the rest of them, they can come out pretty fierceful and powerful. And yet, as you read on, there is the grace that is tempered with it. When you get into chapter 27 in Isaiah, he says this, "At that same time, a fine vineyard will appear. There's something to sing about. I, God, tend it. I keep it well watered. I keep careful watch over it so no one can damage it. I am not angry. I care. Even if it gives me thistles and thorn bushes, I'll just pull them out and burn them up. Let the vine cling to me for safety. Let it find a good and whole life with me. Let it hold on for good and for grace. The days are coming when Jacob shall put down roots and Israel will blossom and grow fresh branches, and it will fill the world with its fruit." There are times that we must stop and examine what we are doing. There are times when our voices need to shout out, even when we don't like it. There are times as these when we are called, once again, to bear good fruit, to bear loving fruit, to bear faithful fruit. For though God is angry, though God is miffed, the sun comes again. For there is deep forgiveness, there is deep grace, there is unconditional love. For God does not give up on us. God will bless us so that we might be a blessing to the world.